Shalom, giving honor and praise to the creator and the maker of heaven and earth. We're going to continue on in part 2 concerning the issue of the Sabbath and the day that it is. Now, getting back to where we had left off in part 1 about Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, verse 9, all the way into verse 16 is very important because here's what happens. You go into the land because the Feast of Tabernacles, called in the New Testament Pentecost, can only be kept inside of the land. A lot of Israelites, and I mean no disrespect intended to the way I was brought up. Blessed be the Most High. I was raised in this way of life, but that's not about me at this point. The point is that a lot of Israelites take it to be the 6th day of the month of Siwan. Siwan being the 3rd month on the Hebrew calendar. But that's not exactly what Leviticus says. It says emphatically, when you come into the land and you reap the harvest. In Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 9 to 10 says, when you put the sickle to the standing corn. So that is to say, when the harvest begins to come up, you take that, you bring that up to the priest. The priest waves that. Now, let's say if that was to be waved on what today or today's calendar, like on a Thursday. Let's say that first harvest came up. You put the sickle to the standing corn on a Thursday. You take that to the priest. He offers that up. From the day that he waves that, it says as in verse 15. Let's go back there. Leviticus 23:15. You shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the waving. So you brought the sheaf of the waving, the priest waves that. Now, whenever that next Sabbath comes in, which is, as I'm stating, will be the 7th day of the week. From that point right there, you start counting 50 days. Okay? Then it says, 7 weeks there shall be complete. Even unto the morrow after the 7th week, you shall number 50 days. So that's how, and on that 50th day, because the word Pentecost, like in the New Testament, means 50, okay? And Shavuot means weeks. So you counting 7 weeks. So in the process of counting these 7 weeks, there's going to be 7 Sabbaths. There's going to be 7 first days of the weeks, 7 second day of the weeks, 7 third day of the weeks. That's just mathematically calculated. Okay? So now, here's the point. Because this whole discussion is in reference with the Sabbath. If the new moon, which we already know and understand, determines the months, because of the Hebrew word Kodesh, which means month, it also means moon. If we are to look and understand that the new moon determines the months, and new moon comes in every 28 to 30 days, and we already see in here that we are to count 7 weeks, that tells you that the months do not determine the weeks. That automatically lets us know that. Because let's see and understand what's going on, brothers and sisters. All right, you have it. If we look at it, right? You have month. You have week. And you have day. Okay, so that way we can gain some understanding of what exactly is going on. Okay? You have month, week, day. Day, the Sabbath is a day. It's a weekly event. And the month is determined, brothers and sisters, as we know and understand, by the moon. So since that is the case, and such is the case, it is very, very important to let it be known and understood that you cannot tell a weekly event by a monthly count. I state again, you cannot tell what you are to do weekly by looking at a count that is based upon a monthly counting, also known as a lunar counting. So let that be noted and understood. Now, wanted to get into another thing concerning this subject matter right here, if we will. Let's go, brothers and sisters, into I have what they call here Dictionary of the Bible by Grant and Rowley. And on page 866, under the subtitle of Sabbath, we read, Sabbath, Hebrew, Shabbath, from the verb Shabbath, meaning to desist. Meaning to desist might be applied to any sacred season as the time of cessation from labor, and is used of the Day of Atonement, which was observed annually on the 10th day of the 7th month. But in usage, it is almost confined to the day of rest, which closed each week of 7 days, the cycle running continuously through the calendar without regard to the month or the year. So I want to sit there and just have that to be read yet again. it says emphatically in the Bible dictionary right here, it says, but in usage, it is almost confined to the day of rest, which closed each week of 7 days. The cycle running continuously through the calendar without regard to the month or the year. So when it says without regard to the month of the or the year, simply meaning, brothers and sisters, regardless of what month it is or regardless of what year it is, the Sabbath is still continuous. The Sabbath, the Shabbat still goes on. So let that be noted and understood. So now, let's go, brothers and sisters, back to Exodus chapter 20. We're going to go to Exodus chapter 20. We're going to start, brothers and sisters, in verse 8. But this time, we're going to go into the Hebrew and see what it says. Exodus 20, verse 8. Zakor et yom ha-shabbat lekwacho, sheshet yamim ta'abo, wa asita kol malateka. Now, very important right here in verse 9, where it says 6 days. Because see, the Hebrew word that we see here is the Hebrew word sheshet. Okay? So that way we can gain an understanding of what's going on. The Hebrew word sheshet means 6. Sheshet yamim, 6 days, ta'abod, wa asita kol malakteka. Now, if we know good and well that the Sabbath day is in remembrance of creation and that there is an order to everything, that means, brothers and sisters, it's not just any yo given 6 days that is talking about. Therefore, it is not just any old seventh day that is talking about. So you can't pick which seventh day that you're going to sit there and have the rest and then say that it's the Sabbath. No, that's not correct according to the Hebrew culture. Now, the point I wanted to get to is you have in Hebrew, the Hebrew word, for instance, Isha, which means woman or, right, or wife. Now, the Hebrew word Eshet means wife of. That means, brothers and sisters, that it is a specific type of woman. Just as much as Shisha means 6, but Sheshet means a specific block of time of 6. It's not just any old given kind of 6. That's very important because if you remember, it says, for in 6 days the Most High made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that in them is. So if we are to be holy like the Most High is holy, like he said in Leviticus chapter 19, verses 1 through 3, which also speaks about observing the Sabbath and honoring of parents. It lets us know and understand, brothers and sisters, that we are to go according to that same type of pattern, that it just not was done haphazardly. You see, when you're dealing with something like the lunar cycle or the monthly cycle like that, that could be on any day of the week. So that means you can have a new month starting on what we call Wednesday. So that just goes to show you right then and there that the days don't determine the weeks and the weeks don't determine the months. So if you are in week 5 of something, that has to be an entirely different month because weeks make months, if you understand the point and the premise that's being stated. So, brothers and sisters, there are certain calendars and counting to certain things. There is even the sabbatical year that you read of in Leviticus chapter 23. And that's when you let the land rest and so forth and so on. We're going to get into that particular subject in the next aspect. Now, some brothers and sisters sit there and ask, well, how do you know that what you call today or Saturday, quote unquote, is the actual Sabbath? And many times they like to sit there and quote Gregory the 13th, which was a pope in Europe. And there's a couple of things to let it be known concerning that kind of fashion. One, the Sabbath was observed by the children of Israel prior to Pope Gregory. Secondly, Pope Gregory was not an Israelite and he did not keep the law, statutes, and the commandments. Another issue that some people bring up is that the fact that what they call Saturn was actually one of the Roman gods. And that when the calendar of Pope Gregory was adopted by the British in the 18th century, they just said, okay, we call it Saturday. And then in turn, you got people keeping the Sabbath on what the Romans called the 7th day of the week. But that right there goes to show you, brothers and sisters, that there's one, people are not using the understanding from the scriptures. And two, people are also forgetting, even if you get into the Roman aspect of stuff, that Israelites was keeping the Sabbath as recorded by the Romans prior to Pope Gregory. Okay, so now I want to get into a subject matter concerning that. I have a book here entitled to cite us the histories. Okay? So that way we can gain some understanding concerning this. And on book 5, we are in book 5, part of verse 4. This is what he says that they say about Israel. They are said to have devoted the seventh day to rest, because that day brought an end to their toils. Now, if you look up to Tacitus, he dated Pope Gregory by several hundred years. Tacitus lived in the era of the 1st century AD. So let that be noted. And this is what he said about the Israelites. He says, they are said to have devoted the seventh day to rest, because that day brought an end to their toils. Later, finding idleness alluring, they gave up the seventh year also to be slothful. Others maintain, now this is what Tacitus is saying that others say about the Israelites. Check this out here. Others maintain that they do this in honor of Saturn, either because their religious principles are derived from the idea who are supposed to have been driven out with Saturn and become the ancestors of the Jewish people, or else because of the 7 stars which govern the lives of men. The star of Saturn moves in the topmost orbit and exercises the mightiest influence, and also because most of the heavenly bodies are round their courses in multiples of 7. Now, this is what Tacitus is saying that others say about the Israelites. Now, the point in reading this is goes to show you a couple of things. One, Israelites were keeping the Sabbath on a weekly basis before Pope Gregory. Another point to be made is the fact that the best way that Tacitus can even equate what Israel was doing on the 7th day, he had to sit there and state, oh, well, the Romans are sitting up there talking about that the Jews are doing this in reference with Saturn, because Saturn was a Roman god that they sat there and dedicated in reference to certain things, if you understand what's going on. So them calling it a day called Saturday later on does not change the fact that the children of Israel was already observing the Sabbath. So if they was observing the Sabbath and somebody decided to call it the day of the lamp or the day of the book or the day of the wall, and the word wall has the connotation to be idolatrous, that doesn't mean that the children of Israel today should not keep the Sabbath, if you understand. Regardless of whatever later nation, I state on purpose, later nation, like the Romans meeting the Israelites much later on in the Israelite history, whatever they decide to call something doesn't change the fact that Israel was already recorded as keeping the 7th day holy. So that right there has to be noted and understood. So now, brothers and sisters, the Romans, as Tacitus stated in that book, he stated that, oh, some people state this and then others people state that. So he himself was just giving different opinions from different Europeans on why the Israelites were doing something at that particular time. So he's not giving a pinpoint definite answer. He's just writing, like Herodotus and Plutarch and others wrote the histories of such and such. He was just a major historian that traveled the world and wrote about certain things. Then there are several accounts of different people doing that throughout the world. Ibn Battuta is another one. He's an author who spoke about Israelites scattering into West Africa. Next subject for another presentation. Now, getting back into the situation about the Sabbath issue. You cannot, brothers and sisters, calculate when the Sabbath is by going according to a monthly count. Why? Because the Sabbath is a weekly count. So now we already showed what the Romans were saying about the Israelites, regardless of the fact that the Romans calling the day the Israelites did something after one of their pagan Roman gods doesn't change the fact of what Israel was doing. And that predated Pope Gregory's calendar. So when Israelites are keeping the 7th day holy, they're not doing it because of Pope Gregory. They're not doing it because they're worshiping Saturn. And also let it be noted in concluding, brothers and sisters, that the Sabbath cannot be determined by a monthly count. Therefore, since, as pointed out in the Bible dictionary, that the Sabbath is continuously going on every 7 days, regardless of what month or regardless of what year it is, the Shabbat stands in its own timeline as a weekly event. So hopefully that was understood. I'm not saying that I've been the best Sabbath keeper, but just wanted to go over a couple of things concerning this type of matter. And with that, I say thank you for the time. Most High bless. I'm open to constructive criticism. Shalom.